We are live.
Hey everybody, this is Art. We're back in 2025 for another series of Ask Art, where we'll be responding to questions, but also sharing updates about what's happening in the district. One of the things we're going to share today is I have now been in the state senate for 10 years. It's surprising. I was elected back in November of 2014. And then on December the 1st, we began the work. I was very surprised. I didn't think I would start the work until swearing in January. But actually, a month ahead of time, we started the work, got sworn in January of 2015. And here we are, January of 2025. It's been an honor to be in this position to try to respond to the concerns of neighbors, create the change and changes in our neighborhoods that will create improvements and a better way of life. And I would certainly want to thank everyone who has supported me in these 10 years as we have done all we can to make the improvements that so many of us really desire and some of us really require. So there are a few updates that I'd like to share before I get into more of the highlights of some of the achievements and activities of my time in office for 10 years. First, we are very aware, and some of you have shared concerns with me and those in my office about cuts and rollbacks that may come from the Trump administration. And so my office, along with members in the Senate caucus in general, have been looking closely at what to forecast for such cuts and rollbacks. And so we are preparing for the changes that may come in access to food, limiting access to food, limiting access to childcare, and limiting access to affordable health care. I am still chair of the Health and Human Services Committee in the Senate, and so we'll be using all the influence and access that we have to do all that we can to protect our neighbors from some of these rollbacks. Any of you who want to join me, please contact my office in this regard. Second, on January 1 of this year, just last week, 21 states raised their minimum wage. Some raised their wage to 15 an hour, other 13, other different numbers. However, Pennsylvania was not amongst the states to raise the minimum wage, where we have been stuck at $7.25 per hour for 15 years. That's right, 15 years. Now, some say nobody's earning $7.25, and there are some at $8.25, and some at $9.25, some at $10.25. We must get the minimum wage in Pennsylvania up to at least $15 an hour. At that level, individuals are not working and still in poverty. That's at 15. But at 8 or 9, hardworking people are stuck in poverty even though they are doing all they can on the job. This is something we can change, and we will need your support because, unfortunately, Senate Republicans have been blocking raising the minimum wage the entire time that I've been in the state Senate, for the last 10 years, even though every year legislators in Harrisburg get a raise. That's right. We get a cost of living raise every year. Wow, we deny hardworking people a decent raise. Now, we had a fantastic press conference on this to highlight it, but it's going to take way more than press conferences to get it done. We will need your support. Had a big event on December the 7th. You know, we're doing what we can to get young people and young professionals into new opportunities so that our nation can have new leadership that reflects our population, our very diverse population. And so we had a school board training, so new people, new potential leaders, could learn what it means to be on a school board. There are over 500 school boards, actually 501 in Pennsylvania, and almost all of them have individuals who are elected to school board positions that come up with the rules and policies that run our public education system throughout the Commonwealth. Only Philadelphia does not have an elected school board. We have come to learn that most of these school boards do not have any diversity at all, even though the student enrollment may be very diverse. So it's time for individuals to step up from diverse communities and take on leadership positions in these communities. This training, I believe, will help individuals to do just that. Now, a few more updates. Just this past Monday, January 6th, we had our third commemoration of the heroes and heroines who stood up for our democracy in the Capitol as the insurrectionists attempted to stop the election of President Biden. We honored these individuals. Over 175 were injured during the storming of the Capitol. Those courageous individuals must have their worth recognized. Their courage, their sacrifice must be recognized. And it's not just those in law enforcement. We also recognize all the congressional members, the vice president, all the staff who had to run for their lives, but then had the courage to come back together and vote to secure that election. And so we honored all those who were involved, and particularly though, those who are in law enforcement. Now, one of the fantastic speakers at this event was a chaplain of the House in Washington, D.C. at the time, a chaplain of the U.S. House, Pastor Elisa Welu. She is now relocated and is the pastor of First United Methodist Church of Germantown. I would like for you all to hear what she shared with us this Monday about her experiences on that day, January 6th, 2021. And so we are going to now play her remarks. Thank you.
And thank you for the opportunity to reflect on this afresh as we enter into this new year. As a church pastor, God blesses me with the opportunity to walk with and care for and deeply love a specific flock of people at a time. Sheep, so to speak, that I get to journey with through the beautiful and sometimes rocky terrain of life. For 13 years, as you mentioned, I had the honor of pastoring a flock at Capitol Hill United Methodist Church in Washington, D.C., just 5 short blocks from the U.S. House of Representatives, and to regularly go in as the substitute chaplain of the People's House. Most of my church members live in the neighborhood behind the Capitol and worked for either a congressional member, a federal agency, an NGO, the administration, something like that. They raised kids in that neighborhood, coached Little League, ushered at church, and hung at the local bars and grills. Our church was red and blue. And though they did not agree on everything politically, they shared this deep reverence, as I think most of you on the call do today, or all do, that the work that was entrusted to, a deep reverence for the work that was entrusted to them, and for the wide diversity of people whose needs they represented and were to care for, whether or not we, the people, fully understand all that civil servants do on our behalf. In 2008, in fact, our church had 3 women working on 3 separate presidential campaigns, McCain's, Clinton's, and Obama's. And these 3 women found time once a week from the road to connect by phone to pray for and with each other. Those are the people, sheep of that faithful flock, who lit up my phone on January 6, 2021, as these tragic events unfolded. First, a woman asked that I call her husband to pray with him. He'd gone back to the office for something and suddenly found himself barricaded in a storage closet. Another member, a former Capitol Police officer who was away from the city at the time, wrote, "Pastor, I feel like someone has broken into my home and tied up my family. What do we do?" Then there was my fellow Bible study leader. His wife was in the midst of chemo treatments, but being a true civil servant and knowing the importance of certification day, she headed into work anyway, only to be locked in a conference room in the height of COVID, completely immunocompromised, with some others who refused to mask. As I headed into the neighborhood to try to throw the doors open of our church for anyone who needed to pray or process, the next morning I was stopped by these young National Guardsmen who were putting up barbed wire all over our home, our neighborhood. And one of them, with eyes wide open, said, "Reverend, when I signed up for the Guard, I never imagined I'd be deployed to our Capitol." It's at that moment that a young mom called me and said, "Can you talk to my kids? They're standing on the front lawn wondering why there are assault vehicles driving down the street." I share these stories because A, I love this flock, but B, because for those who were there that day, they will never forget it. And neither can we. We cannot forget the extraordinary courage of the officers and staff who quick thinking and sacrificial acts saved literally hundreds of lives. If you haven't spent much time in the Capitol, you wouldn't understand the floor plans and the maze that it is. But if a few of those officers had not thought so quickly to get the senators out of the chamber, it would have literally been disastrous. Can't forget the courage of the MPD police officers that came running when they were called for help. One of them, a beloved sergeant, texted me on her way and said simply, "Please, period, pray, period. We need it, Pastor, period." So we can't forget their courage, nor can we forget that January 6th reveals part of who we are and where we are as a nation in this moment of time. Following the courage of the officers and civil servants, we too can be courageous people to recognize some of this as a current American problem, a human problem, and a legacy of slavery. But most of all, it's my fervent prayer that we approach this day not with the aboutism that often happens, what about this problem or what about that problem? But instead just not tune our attention away, but instead sit with the risks revealed that day, risks we still face, so that we can humbly pause to recognize the roots of violence within ourselves, each of us, and our nation. And we can reflect on the practices that make for true peace, for the possibility of democracy, which, as my friend Reverend Carter puts it, after the violent transition of power in 2020, we can't take for granted. But the possibility of democracy is that every person is seen as equal, as valued, as human, and I would add, as created in the image of God who formed each of us. And when we can see and believe in the possibility of someone else that we do not understand, then those barricades are taken down, and we do the hard work of never repeating this act and living into the promise of this holy Epiphany Day, where wise folks from all over come together and see what God can have for us as one people.
This was a tremendous message by the pastor. I cannot thank her enough for her insight, her prayer, and obviously for her deep faith in all of us. And I, along with her, as well as Senator Vincent Hughes, who spoke, Senator Nikhil Saval, who spoke, and Senator Street, who was present, say what was said at the time, and never again should we allow a mob to try to take over our nation so that any one person can be president by the use of violence or any other office in our nation. Now, having shared that, and it was a tremendous day of recognizing those who had made such sacrifices for us all, I did want to pivot to looking at the last 10 years of my service in the state Senate. And I only got about 15 minutes, actually less than that, to share it. So we're going to try to go very quickly through 10 years. Doing 10 years in 10 minutes. Well, we'll see how far we can go. So we have a slide deck that we'll bring up now. But I do want to share for those who are wondering, this is a combination of the American flag and the Juneteenth flag, both core symbols of freedom for our nation. One founded out of the founding of the nation in 1776 era, and the other founded out of the Civil War reestablishment of our nation in Juneteenth. So let's go to the next slide, please, and then let's go to the next slide, please. So my office has focused on a few big issues. One of them has been climate sustainability. We know our nation has faced quite a bit of climate damage. And unfortunately, we can see that climate damage in the terrible wildfires occurring right now in Southern California. And we've seen that climate damage here in Pennsylvania more in the form of flooding. We know that no family deserves to be flooded, and that we need to protect the dignity of every person by having them in a position where the planet is still sustainable. And so a few things that I'll mention here is that we have made every effort to have clean water in our schools, particularly water free from lead. After I visited Flint, Michigan, and saw the terrible conditions of lead in their water, I came back to Pennsylvania, and we have had a number of advocacy positions that have culminated this year, where there's money for school districts to test for water with lead and to remediate water with lead with filtration devices. This is a significant step forward, and one from which I'm very, very proud. We also were advocates to get the PFAS out of the water that was detected in some point in Abington and Cheltenham, and to a limited extent in Springfield townships. Fortunately, through the work of Aqua and our advocacy, the PFAS has been eliminated, essentially almost to an undetectable level, not completely eliminated, but to almost undetectable level. And that will help us all make sure we have clean water. Next slide, please. I will also say, finally, on climate sustainability, we can stay on this slide. And we've been working to have legislation passed that will increase the incentives for renewable energy, particularly incentives for solar energy. We need diverse energy sources in our state, and we certainly need clean energy to be an increasing source of the energy for our homes and our businesses. I have joined with Governor Wolf, then Governor Wolf, and now Governor Shapiro as advocates for these new clean energy standards. We have some distance to go to get them passed, but I know renewable energy is a core part of our climate response and a climate that is sustainable. Now we're on economic fairness, and we unfortunately have a nation where there's a tremendous amount of economic unfairness, probably the highest inequality of income and wealth almost of any time in American history. And we know that individuals are being left out. We have been fighting, as you probably know, to raise the minimum wage for each of the 10 years. We have been blocked, unfortunately, by my Senate Republican colleagues. But we have renewed the fight here in 2025 as well. Now, we have had some significant progress on the other hand. I did a tour around the Commonwealth to hear from people who are in poverty about the obstacles of getting out, the obstacles to getting out of poverty. 4 features were mentioned. 1, the obstacle of low pay, hardworking people in low pay. Hard to get out of poverty if you're only making $8 an hour. 2nd, access to childcare that was affordable. 3rd, affordable housing. Folks need a place to stay. That was affordable. And finally, transportation. Affordable and accessible transportation, particularly in some parts of the state where there's no public transportation. And individuals talked about taking Ubers and other ride shares that was extremely expensive. Now, we've been able to address 2 out of the 4. First, on housing, we've been able to secure over the 10 years, now we're going to get to $100 million a year to provide affordable housing for individuals throughout the Commonwealth. It's not enough money, but it is a significant amount of dollars. And I am really ecstatic to share that now I know that from the time we start $100 million a year for 10 straight years, we would have put $1 billion into affordable housing. I can't tell you how proud I am of that. Second, we learned that individuals who are receiving child care assistance from the state were getting cut off once they hit certain income levels. And so we recognized that we needed to expand the number of households and families that could continue to get child care assistance. And we were successful. And so before we passed this legislation, if you were someone earning about $55,000 a year as a family of 3, that was the cutoff. Now, today, that same family of 3, the cutoff is about $80,000. So that allows families to have more assistance over more income. And I don't know if you all know, childcare is extremely expensive. And without it, you can't go to work. So those are a few of the accomplishments that we would like to highlight. We've been working hard on education. I'm still on the board of FIA, College Access Program with LaSalle, helping our young people understand the choices that are involved in college or not college. That program is seeing several hundred young people to participate, and we want to continue it. So those are some of the accomplishments. Let's go to the next slide, please. Embracing every person. So you know this is really challenging because we have a nation where there's hate, discrimination, and exclusion. And obviously that's not embracing every person. That is unfortunately demeaning some people. So we know that to have a place where everyone's worth is recognized, that is whether you're Black, brown, or white, rich or poor, urban or rural, we all have dignity, God-given worth. And we've got to make sure that worth is recognized. Here, in terms of embracing people, our agenda, what we have put a lot of effort into is responding to students across the Commonwealth who complain that they have been victims of racial harassment and discrimination at our state universities. And so we toured over 3,000 miles visiting state universities, hearing from students, hearing from administrators, and we put significant pressure on these colleges and universities and produced a report, the Enough Report, which is available on my website. But from this report that summarizes these unfortunate experiences of our young people and the attempts of the universities to respond, our advocacy has produced some real results. Now there's mandatory diversity training on these campuses. Now the campuses can outsource for mental health support for our young people. So it's more likely that our young people get a mental health provider that's like them. In addition, these universities now have DEI staff that are dedicated to promoting a welcoming experience for our young people. There are many more changes that we need, but we have made a significant start. These are some of the areas in which we have tried to make sure that every person is respected and recognized. Next slide, please. So we're coming down to our last few slides, and this one involves the unfortunate violence that our city experienced, particularly during the pandemic. Reducing gun violence has always been a core agenda of mine. Unfortunately, as a result of getting over $100 million of state grants into our communities, we were able to get grants to effective, proven organizations that were reducing gun violence, like Ceasefire Philly. And in addition to getting money to those that are effective at reducing gun violence, my office was able to coordinate some of the organizations that were doing the work so that there could be a concentration on the high crime areas and the high risk individuals. That was the combination of focus that was so important for intervention. There have been some tremendous results. In 2022, we had 154 total shootings in the Northwest. In 2023, we had 100 total shootings in the Northwest. And as of the end of December, the end of December of 2024, we were down to about 63 total shootings. That's non-fatal and fatal. 154, 163. I cannot thank all the organizations that were part of the effort to reduce the gun violence, certainly including law enforcement, but also those directly in contact with the most violent individuals to get them to stop shooting and turn their lives around. This has been a tremendous success, and I can't be more proud of all those on my team who were involved in this work. Next slide, please. I believe this is our last slide, and this is a focus on, next to last slide. And we know, unfortunately, that we have a long history in America of inequality for women. And we know that to get everyone's dignity recognized, we've got to have equality for women. And so one of the activities in which I've been involved successfully was the relocation, passing legislation to require relocation of individuals who've been victims of domestic violence in public housing and get them out of that place where they were victimized within 5 days. That's the fastest relocation plan in the United States of America. And I'm glad that I could have been part of it, and that was a bipartisan effort. We're still advocating for reproductive rights, because we know that's all part of freedom and dignity. You may not know that raising the minimum wage will mostly affect women. It's women who are most of the low-paid, low-wage workers in our state. Getting that wage up will go a long ways. And we are fighting for a Family Medical Leave Act right now. We recently learned that over 90% of Pennsylvanians want to see paid leave for families. We can get it done. It's occurred in other states. And our last slide relates to a committee that I have chaired for some time. And let's go to the next slide, please. And that is the Health and Human Services Committee. I'm so proud of the work on this committee. I know we're running over time, but I just wanted to share something that I heard today. We were able to get funding for healthcare clinics. There were mobile clinics and community-based clinics out of funding from the Biden administration. This is all during the COVID-19 circumstances. And many of these clinics were supported around the entire Commonwealth. In a conversation today, I learned about Temple University's clinic, and they have a mobile clinic as direct result of a grant that they received from the program that we established. Today, I learned that a young man visited their mobile clinic that was stationed down at the ShopRite on Fox Street. He was screened. As a result of the screening, he had a serious condition, and he was immediately referred to the emergency room. When he got to the emergency room, he was immediately cared for and got a heart stent. That mobile health screening saved his life. I was stunned to hear this story, excited and happy. And so this is an example of some of the work that I have been doing on the Health and Human Services Committee. This is a quick summary of 10 years of experience. Our 10 years includes summer reading camps. Now over 2,000 individuals, children between kindergarten and third grade have participated in our summer reading camps. That has been fantastic. Thank you for all those who work with us in our mentoring programs as we encourage the growth of mentoring organizations and so much more. I can't thank my team enough because I cannot do this alone. And we have seen over 20,000 individuals who come into my offices, and we've helped them with all kinds of challenges they may have had, whether it be a notary public, handicap license plate, or even a crosswalk that was needed. I have been blessed to be part of such an amazing team and to be, in fact, state senator for all of you. That's what we've got for our Ask Art series today. I hope you'll join us as we continue these conversations. And I also encourage you to either sign up for our e-news, where we provide monthly updates on our activities, as well as our social media, where we provide daily updates about what we are doing and community events. Thank you so much. Take care.